let's get started. So we've heard a lot today, and as we all know, about Israel being the startup nation. When I was in Israel earlier this year, we met with Chemi Perez, who spoke here last year, and Chemi said that we're actually moving from the startup nation to the impact nation. And we're really fortunate to have time today to actually talk about how Israel is becoming the impact nation and innovating with startups that are actually solving large social and environmental issues. To start us off today, we're really fortunate to have a message from Sir Ronald Cohen, who is one of the most highly regarded people in this space. And Sir Ronald has actually recorded a message for us all the way from the UK.
It's a great pleasure for me to be with you in Sydney via video link. I'm very sorry that I couldn't be there in person. I love Sydney. I have family in Sydney, and I come once a year to Australia and visit Sydney. So I have great affection for the city. I'd like to kick off just by congratulating the Israeli embassy on putting together the bridge, a conference designed to strengthen the bonds between Australia and Israel. And I would also like to congratulate the embassy on recognizing the growing importance of impact investment and allocating time to this subject and giving me the opportunity to address you on this subject directly. Now, we're all very much aware of the fact that a big change is taking place with regard to social issues across the world. Governments are unable to cope with social issues. Welfare states were brought in to do specifically that, and they are everywhere throwing up their hands because they don't have the resources, nor do they have the skills to tackle social issues in appropriate ways. And so everywhere across the world, we're finding social issues spreading instead of shrinking. And in 2000, I was asked to look at what was then the issue of poverty, and I began to realize that our system had operated in a very funny way. What do I mean by that? We had found ways, imaginative ways, through venture capital, for instance, with which I was so involved, of connecting those who wanted to make money to the capital markets. But if you looked at the not-for-profit sector across the world, it's huge. In the United States, it's got 11 million people associated with it. In Europe, a similar number. And yet the characteristic of the not-for-profit sector everywhere is that nobody has money, and as a result, very few have achieved any sort of scale. And I began in 2000 to think through ways in which we might be able to bring capital markets and social entrepreneurs together. And impact investment does just that. I traced the growth of impact investment to the year 2010, when the first social impact bond was launched. A social impact bond, you know, in Australia, because you have at least two of them in New South Wales, a social impact bond links a financial return to the investor to the achievement of a measurable social improvement, an improvement in the rate at which prisoners are going back to prison, dropout rates from school, the burden that broken families bring to the state, and so on and so forth. And by connecting a social return to a financial return, it begins to do something very important. It begins to prove that in the social area, it is possible to measure improvement, just as we measure it in the financial area. And this brought, through the work of the Global Investment Task Force, which I was privileged to lead, this brought us to a realization that the world has moved from measuring financial returns in the 19th century to measuring risk and return in the 20th century, and now in the 21st century already measuring risk, return, and impact. And if you look around at the headlines in the financial press, you will begin to see big companies like BlackRock and Goldman Sachs and Merrill Lynch and UBS and Morgan Stanley begin to launch products that try to achieve both a financial and a social return. And I'd like to place impact investment between socially responsible investment by companies which are doing their job but trying to do no harm generally, and philanthropy, which of course we all know, traditional philanthropy, which has purely social objectives, no financial objectives from the grants that are being given. Impact investment sits between these two. Basically, what characterizes it is the measurement of both financial and social or environmental returns at the same time. There are two avenues to do this. One, through social impact bonds and other similar instruments, is through the funding of not-for-profit organizations. For the first time, they can raise investment capital. They can create balance sheets. They don't just rely on grants and hand-to-mouth funding. And the second way is through the funding of profit-with-purpose businesses. Businesses that have, at their core, in their business model, preferably, a combination of financial and social objectives, or which have both financial and social objectives, even though their financial model doesn't immediately incorporate social objectives. So a company which is manufacturing widgets, but has an objective to bring into its workforce a number of people who were previously illiterate, for instance. And at this conference, you're going to hear a presentation about this second strand of profit-with-purpose businesses in Israel from the Bridges Israel team. Now, I was privileged to found Bridges with Phil Newborough and Michelle Giddins in 2002 to focus on investment in the poorest parts of the UK. Today, Bridges has expanded this mission to include all of impact investment, including social impact bond funds, real estate funds investing in not just poorer areas, but assisted living accommodation and so on and so forth, and private equity, venture capital funds that are investing in private companies, which are seeking to achieve both financial and social measurable returns. My feeling about Australia and Israel is that Australia has been a source of philanthropy for Israel for a very long time. And I have personally spoken to many delegations of Australian visitors who have come through. Because Australia is one of the leading players in this area of impact investment, very active in the Social Investment Task Force, in the steering group which has followed, I think there's a real opportunity for Australian investors to help Israel add to the title of Startup Nation, the title of Impact Nation. Now, you know that Israel faces bigger social issues than most other countries. The poverty levels are extremely high, both because of the Arab population and the Haredi population, but also because the other secular poor in Israel are very numerous. And if we can manage to bring investment capital to tackle some of these social issues and enable the investors to make a return which enables their foundations or their family offices to recycle that money again, then this is a very significant contribution. The Bridges Israel team has come together, bringing people of great expertise in investment and venture capital and business, has come together because we all feel that it is crucial for us to help Israel in this way. Philanthropy, which measures very little, doesn't really achieve all of the objectives that it sets itself. We know that. If you have much more focused investment, and if you measure the social outcomes and environmental outcomes that you achieve, you stand a much better chance of innovating and achieving very significant improvement in people's lives. So that's my message to you today. As investors, you'll be investing in a new set of opportunities. If you look at the investments that Bridges has made in the UK, you find investments like the gym, which charges a quarter of the fee that a normal gym charges, is open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and grows faster than normal gym companies, and floats on the London Stock Exchange for a £250 million valuation. So there's a new set of opportunities that you begin to define when you begin to look at poorer areas and lower price levels. And there's also a lower correlation to interest rates and to the economy. These businesses do not generally go with the bulk of other businesses. They have their own ecosystems, and they are separated to a degree from the vicissitudes of financial and economic cycles. So I've invested in every Bridges fund. I think my blended return last time I looked was in the mid-teens, net of fees and carry. So I think it is possible for all of you and for us to do good as we do well. Thank you very much.